So question 4, I'd like to move on to is, so I've been speaking to a few people this week about how our association, the friends, the family, the people around us can enhance our memory of Krishna and his teachings, right, by the power of their personal, affectionate, and like-minded association. So association can also improve this feminine quality of memory. So, and on the flip side, unfavorable association blocks our memory and can be a stumbling block. So how can we find and keep the right association in our lives and stay absorbed, immersed, and engaged in this memory of Krishna?
Mm. Just move. I guess this builds on our previous point of hearing attentively. You know, if we look at association, that's what company do we keep where we take the opinion as fact? Okay, that's really association, right? We take the company that we're keeping, how much of it do we take opinion as fact? It's so important to curate who we spend time with. How do we spend time with them? Because we can be physically in the company of devotees, but not necessarily engaging in devotional service or in devotional conversation. Okay, why do we spend time with them? You know, often, especially if in your household you have a lot of devotees, you might just reduce it to, oh, well, it's because we live together, because we're family. Do you see what I mean? So I want to introduce 2 principles here that are really important to understanding the power of association, is that we can actively seek it, but we also actively attract it. Okay, so actively seeking good association, we all must do when we are actively curating. Who do I spend time with? Why do I spend time with them? And what am I doing with them? Okay, how am I spending my time with them? And why am I spending time with them? Then secondly, as well as through that association, but through my other activities, how am I changing what I'm exposing myself to? So literally, I'm changing the frequency within me. By changing the frequency and the consciousness that I have within me. So by changing what we hear, like we were speaking about earlier, what our mind is recalling is also different. That changes the frequency that's going on in our mind. So it's like we're all tuning into different radio stations. And so as our consciousness changes, we will also attract higher frequency individuals with higher consciousness. So, and sometimes people hold back from evolving spiritually because they are scared of losing the people who are in their life at the moment. So many people, when they come into Krishna consciousness and at various stages of their Krishna consciousness, inevitably are going to have to lose and say goodbye to people because they're upgrading their consciousness. And, you know, it's be prepared that if you're going to upgrade your consciousness, the people who are around you will either upgrade with you, or they'll accept you and not block you, or they won't be able to bear it being around you because they don't want to go there. And ultimately, we then have to sometimes it happens even in people's own homes, you know, maybe with your kids, maybe with your spouse, maybe with your parents. You want to be moving, maybe with your friends. You want to move your consciousness forward, be progressive, grow more, deepen your attachment to Krishna. And that's attracting a higher association. Are you going to embrace that higher association, or are you going to reject it in fear of losing, you know, the association you currently have? So association has a powerful effect on what we hear and therefore what we remember. Because when we have uplifting consciousness, then it's inevitable what we hear, the examples we see, the interactions we have are more devotional in nature. And so the expectation is different. The answers are different. Because remember, the more devotional we become, we're looking less for an answer which fits and makes things comfortable in this world. Often the more devotional we become, the answer we're looking for is maybe it doesn't fit in this world, but this is what the mood of and mentality of the devotees in Goloka Vrindavan is. So association is a very powerful way to utilize our memory for the evolution of our consciousness.
Association is a powerful way to utilize our memory for the evolution of consciousness. Wow, that's nice. And also I really liked what you said. I hope as Citi-Sakti Mataji was saying, we're taking notes, because I know definitely when I come to your sanghas, I take notes. I just have my head down, mainly trying to catch everyone. But I think it's true, what you said about who are we associating with and how are we associating. Even if we just write those two words down, anyone who's listening, who and how, and then reflect, because you could do that in the moment. You could be with someone talking with them, be like, okay, who is this and how am I associating with them? Is it favorable for my practice of bhakti, or is it not? Is it some obligation because of fear, like you said, that I don't want to lose this person? And so I think finding people with whom we can speak like that and where we are accepted and encouraged is really important if we want to make progress on the path. So up-leveling our association if we want to up-level. So
also choosing to change how we interact, especially when we're surrounded by good association. I know many devotees who they are surrounded by good association, but because they're surrounded by it all the time, it's almost like they tend to keep the conversations quite mundane because they forget the value of the person that they're with. So,
Right.
this is it. Devotee association, high quality devotee association, increases all 4 types of memory. Increases our physiological or neurological memory, increases our metaphysical memory, increases our spiritual memory, and our pure devotional memory. Okay, because the high quality association is going to be more evolved in all of those areas.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And could you just briefly describe the difference between those? You talked about the physiological, the metaphysical, the spiritual, and the pure devotional.
Yes, we talked about it right at the start.
Right. Okay.
But just in summary, the physiological and neurological is just your working memory day to day, what we understand to be accessible to us immediately. Your metaphysical memories lying there in your subtle body, previous lifetimes, early lifetime memories, things maybe happened a few weeks ago that you've buried down deep and are only accessible in certain circumstances. Spiritual memory is that which comes, Krishna is talking about knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness, and the understanding by which to come to him comes from surrendering. And then the pure devotional pure devotional memory is who am I, who is Krishna, and what's our relationship that ultimately comes from a completely different realm.
I love it. I love the way you think. It's like so simple yet sublime and just so deep. And yeah, I definitely needed the reminder, even though you spoke about it. And I think that brings the point of repetition, which we're also just talking about, that we need to attentively and regularly, and could we add repeatedly here? Because I feel like I could probably understand that and remember that. Definitely need to listen.
You are expert in what you do. You're bringing your teaching skills here because, as a teacher, the power of repetition. So.
Definitely. And they even say that what I love about you and any teacher that involves the enjoyment and the pleasure aspect of learning. We're here, we're smiling, we're laughing, we're dancing, we're singing, all of that. Study actually showed that if you want to remember something, it takes 400 repetitions, synaptically. But if you have fun while you're doing it, it takes 40 or something like that. So it's also the mood and the appreciation and the encouragement, all of that matters. If you have a teacher that you don't like, I feel comfortable with you and otherwise I would find it difficult to learn from you. So I think that's important as well. The personalities. So question 5 is, association carries the energy of synergy and enhances memory. Remembering all the time that Krishna's been there for us on our journey of spiritual growth and evolution is a great factor for increasing our memory of him. Can you share some thoughts on how we can see Krishna's hand in our lives with gratitude to be able to cultivate the appreciative, loving memory of him?
Get to know him. What do I mean by this? Children, when we're children, we don't really understand what our parents do for us or why they do it. Okay, the intention behind it, until we generally become older and start getting to know them as individuals, as a person beyond just being my parent, right? And often until we become parents ourselves, where there's certain things we won't understand. It's similar with Krishna in that, okay, we're never going to be God. We're trying as hard as we can to be God here, but we just don't have the compassion to be able to do it. And God is very compassionate by nature. So Krishna is very compassionate by nature. We need to get to, if we can understand him better, understand who he is. You look at Bhagavad Gita, Krishna spends time giving Arjun's space to get to know Krishna as beyond being his cousin, right? So getting to know who he is through his activities, through his interactions with his devotees, and his interventions in the lives of his devotees, for example, through Bhagavad Gita, through sadhu sangha, and through, hearing other people's realizations and their experiences in their Krishna consciousness and your own ones. Look at how Krishna's impacted your life, how so many things have changed since you took to spiritual life, things that you never thought you would change in this lifetime. The impossible has become possible. See, because Krishna does many things. He has many outcomes from one action, right? He's because he's so compassionate. It's like the loving parent. With one interaction, they will be able to do something which is of benefit for all of their children. Okay, and Krishna is the Supreme Father. So when he intervenes, whether that intervention is the source is karma or mercy, and often a combination of both, there are many outcomes, and those outcomes take place at different times. And this is evident if we see the lives of Krishna's devotees. We really will see how, you'll see in a longitudinal way how Krishna's decisions and interactions in their life ultimately was for their benefit. It's like the child who hates it that their parent wakes them up every morning early and gets them to bathe, cleanse themselves internally and externally, and then before they eat anything, okay, before they do their puja, anything. They might hate it when they're younger. Hands down, when they're older and they find that those things are just a no-brainer for them, they'll be like, wow, behind that pain was a loving hand. So, but it does require a leap of faith. Okay. We always have to make some leap of faith. We do it all the time. We are actually very accustomed to it as human beings. Okay. And it's very easy to make a little leap of faith where, again, our memory is and our is being employed in the recollection of Krishna's pastimes. Okay, in the recollection of how at every step he's constantly looking to see how can I best serve my devotee in this situation. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about how a little progress on this path can protect you from the greatest fear, from the greatest danger. The key difference between, one of the very obvious differences actually between those who take shelter of God, those who take shelter of Krishna versus those who don't. It's not what happens to them. Okay, they can live two very identical external lives, socio-demographically, okay, physiologically, socially, psychologically. But what's different is the person who's devotional knows why what they're going through is happening to them. Whereas the other person doesn't really understand why. They know what and they're experiencing, but they don't know why. And that often is more dangerous and our greatest source of fear. I don't know why this is happening to me, right? If you take the example of, you look at surgery, okay? If I was to grab someone, not tell them what I was doing or why I was doing it, and I grab a knife and I cut open their, abdomen, remove a cancerous tumor, stitch them back up. I've given them anesthetic. Yes, I've given them, painkillers and put them to sleep, but they wake up with, stitches on their abdomen, have some recollection of being put to sleep, etc. They'll be traumatized. They'll be angry. They'll hate me. Because they'll be like, what happened and why? Why did it happen? But if I turn around and say, okay, excuse me, you've got a cancer in your abdomen. I need to remove it. It will save your life. Sure. Then they'll willingly take the anesthetic. They will willingly accept the stitches and they'll be grateful and happy. So when we get to know Krishna and his pastimes with his devotees, Bhagavatam is full of experiences that are relatable and also experiences that hopefully most of us won't have to go through. Okay. And it really helps us to understand why something is happening to us. And, this getting to know Krishna makes it easier to understand the loving hand behind the pain. When we understand the loving hand behind the pain. We trust the hand behind the pain. And there is, literally an acceptance and a transformation. It makes us more accepting of the transformation that's about to come about. It's much harder to heal a person who's resistant to the healing because they don't trust what you're doing for them, right? I mean, look at even simple statements from our philosophy, like the holy name can clear more sins than we could ever commit. Even when it's chanted, in its shadow state, even when it's chanted offensively, it can clear more sins. I mean, sins and offenses are different. That's a fact. That's not a sentimental, hyperbolic statement. That's a fact, which really means that if you're calling Krishna, then things are being cleared quicker than you could make them happen. And yet, if you're still experiencing something, then it must be, gosh, much more must have been due to me. I'm just getting, what I'm getting is pales in comparison because it's being picked up early. It's like the surgeon who says, listen, let's operate now so you don't have to suffer the consequences of your, cancer. I'm going to give you another example. This is a real one. So I saw a patient recently. He was feeling very sad, depressed. And he was feeling sad and depressed because he'd had most of his bowel removed. Now, this is what he told me. He said 3 weeks ago, and he'd had most of his bowel removed, so he had a stoma bag. Okay, stoma bag is, there's now an external connection of bodily excrement. One doesn't, the back passage is no longer working. Okay. And which can be a really big life adjustment for a lot of people, right? So he's feeling down, and he was explaining that 3 weeks ago, I was walking around with no symptoms, nothing. Literally, it was 3 weeks ago. He said, I was walking around with no symptoms, nothing. I just had a little bit of constipation and a bit of a stomach ache. I went to see the doctor. It was nothing to write home about. And went to see the doctor, told him about my pattern of changes. He did an abdominal examination, felt a lump, sent me for an MRI, found out that I've got quite significant cancer. Because of my private healthcare, I got booked in. It's all been whipped out really quickly. He said, but because I didn't get a chance to even feel the pain, this feels traumatic to me that somebody's changed my body significantly. He understood that his logic didn't make sense and he should be grateful, but he couldn't connect with it because he'd not even been allowed to, he hadn't even experienced any of the symptoms of the cancer. It'd been whipped out before he could feel it. And that's often what's happening for us as devotees. We think we're suffering, and it's unfair, and the suffering we're getting is too much. But it's often just a token of when we haven't really been allowed to feel the full thing. We're being saved before. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I remember hearing in a class by Srila Prabhupada that it was something that he was quoting a verse from the Brahma Samhita, karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhajan, that Krishna, he reduces what a devotee is due, because he's seeing that we're trying to approach him. And so I think Prabhupada said something like, you might have supposed to get like your whole arm cut off, but Krishna reduces it to
cut
like
your
a paper
finger.
cup. Or maybe someone was quoting Prabhupada and then sharing their own example. I can't remember, but it absolutely does make sense. And I'm just feeling a real sense of your encouraging us and reminding us that we want to trust Krishna, cares for us deeply. He wants the best for us. And even Srila Prabhupada, he would sign his letters, your ever well-wisher. So can we trust Krishna? Can we trust Prabhupada? That ball is in our court. It's up to us. It's not that, Krishna wants us, as he's forcing us, he's imposing that you have to accept me. And we might think that sometimes he says, surrender to me and all that kind of stuff. But actually, no, he's leaving the decision up to us. It's up to us that we trust him. And that means that, even when it's painful, it's difficult, we don't waver. That there's the Chataka bird example as well, that the thunder cloud, it's all that thunder is going on, but still it won't drink water from anywhere else. It will only go to that thunder cloud. So for us to stay in the shelter of Krishna, even if our life, feels a bit troubled and difficult sometimes, I love the way that you're encouraging us to have that faithfulness and loyalty and trust, in Guru and Krishna. Thank you so much.
But we can only really develop that trust if we get to know him, which means we have to hear and read about him. And that's where we employ our memory. Feed our memory, feed ourselves the things that so that we can use our power of recollection to remember the different examples where Krishna comes through in our own lives, in the lives of the Vaishnavas, in the lives of the saints and the acharyas and the sacred texts, and what he tells us about himself. Because if we don't recall what he tells us about himself, then we're not going to really understand why he comes through. So reading and hearing is just so essential. You can't love a person that you don't know, let alone trust them.
Absolutely. That impacted me as soon as I came to the path of bhakti, because I was 22 years old. This was 16 years ago. I went to my first retreat at Bhaktivedanta Mana. Shruti Dharma Prabhu, who was then the temple president, the former temple president, he said, "What if I said to you, what's your mom's name?" And you were like, "I don't know." "What is she like?" "I don't know." What is she not like?" "I don't know." "What food is she like?" "I don't know." "What does she do with her time?" "I don't know, but I love her." And we were all just like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. So then he was trying to impress us upon us that same thing, that if you want to love Krishna, trust Krishna, you have to, as you just said, Citi-Sakti Mataji, regularly hear and read and speak about him. So thank you for this point. So yeah, moving on to question 6. Taking note of Prabhupada highlighting Krishna's word for memory in Bhagavad Gita 10:34 as smṛtir, in Bhagavad 15:15 as well, Krishna uses this word. He says, "Mata smṛtir jnanam apohanam." You've mentioned it a few times as well. From me comes this remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness in relation to the spiritual memory you were speaking about earlier. And Rupa Goswami says that rules and regulations on the path of bhakti are meant to bring us to this point of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna. So we would like to explore what this means and how do we do this practically in day-to-day life. Please could you share some thoughts to start us off in this discussion, or to continue? What does it mean to always remember Krishna and never forget him, and how can we practically do this in daily life, moment to moment, to increase our memory of him?
This phrase, always think of me and never forget me. To always remember something, always recall someone, never forget that person. That's eternal. Okay, this is eternal memory, eternal recollection, which means it comes from the eternal self. This always think of me and never forget me is not something that can just be done with the mind and brain alone, because the mind and brain cannot permanently hold something greater than itself or that outlives it. Remember, this mind, this body will die. So this highest principle of pure devotional service, always think of Krishna and never forget him, it comes from a different place. This, there's different stages to this type of remembering. And actually, when you speak about Rupa Goswami, speaking about, it's actually Nectar of Instruction, verse 8, where he says, the essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging the tongue and mind. And really with the purpose that in this way we end up living in Vraj, okay, and with the Lord and serving under Krishna and his devotees. And then we follow in the footsteps of the beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. Rupa Goswami here is talking about more and more the eternal realm, how this always think of me and never forget me really comes from a place within us and is experienced in a place within us which is beyond the mind and the brain. The mind and brain just act as a bridge to reach there. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, he talks about the different stages. And he's quoting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the purport of verse 8 of Nectar of Instruction. He says, in the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. Mm-hmm. This is called Shravan Das, the stage of hearing, which is what we've been talking about. How do we fine-tune this human memory? Okay, how do we use it to its best? We hear, we read, we speak, right? Mm. He goes on to say, so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur goes on to say, by constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of the Lord and hearing of his transcendental form, qualities, and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance, called Varana Dasha. When one attains this stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of Smarna Vashtha, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarana. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated and it's called meditation. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it is called smṛtir. By uninterrupted and unceasing smṛtir, one enters the stage of samadhi or spiritual trance. After smarana dasha or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position, and at that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relationship with Krishna. That is called sampati dasha, the perfection of life. So this always think of me and never forget me is the culmination of all the 4 different types of memory we're talking about. Ultimately, engaging our neurological and physiological memory, engaging our metaphysical memory, and engaging our philosophical and spiritual memory, ultimately culminates in always being able to think of him and never forgetting him, which is actually what our eternal nature is. We're re-establishing that, we're re-invoking it, and we are recovering it. We're recovering ourselves. So and going back to the first sentence of the passage I read, in the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. This is called Shravana Dasha. Okay, and constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna by speaking it and hearing about him, we then accept. Because you're not going to think about or remember something you haven't accepted. Someone can tell you something. Part of memory and recollection is whether I accept this or not. When we're dismissive of something or someone, we don't remember it. We don't remember them.
Yep.
Because they're of no interest. So this acceptance, one attains to the stage of acceptance called Varana Dasha. We accept the more we hear, because the mind, again, aligns with the soul. All layers, subconscious, unconscious, and conscious. The neurology aligns with the soul. Everything, the body aligns with the soul, becomes a bridge to the soul. So always think of me, never forget me. How do we do it in this body? Yes, hearing, chanting, remembering, but also serving, also engaging our talents, engaging our purpose or the recipient of our purpose. Who am I doing this for and why? These are the ways that in this world we always think of Krishna and never forget him. This is how we engage our physiological and psychological memory, but ultimately so that our real memory is awakened, because our real memory is completely absorbed in Krishna.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And yeah, I love how you're talking about how we can do it in a diverse number of ways, because I remember actually there is a purport in Nectar of Instruction. Srila Prabhupada says that the ways you can serve Krishna or something like that, he's saying, is unlimited. And there's another verse Prabhupada quotes Rupa Goswami, Yena Tena Prakarena Mana Krishna Nivesana, that somehow or other think of Krishna. It's not like it's limited to only this way. I love how you're encouraging us to think broadly and dynamically, like, okay, how is it in this situation, or according to my nature, my personality, my interest, my talent, that I can remember Krishna. It's a very personal thing. So thank you for that. Moving on to the next question. In some of your classes in Spiritual Warriors, Sanghas I've attended, I've heard you speak about udipans. So what is an udipan, and how can udipans enhance our memory of Krishna?
Udipans refer, if we look technically at the language, udipans specifically refer to evoking the very internal and eternal, always think of me, never forget me, right? It's and actually udipan means stimulus. It's a stimulus that evokes feelings for Krishna. And this doesn't mean just, when I say just, I'm not saying this to minimize it, but this isn't just about creating an emotional response in our current psychology and physiology, right? Sometimes we get very caught up in feeling it, and we only want to do the things that make us feel excited in our Krishna consciousness, or make us feel weepy, or give us, goosebumps and things like that. No, udipan is actually really those stimuli, and so for example, Krishna's paraphernalia, or Krishna's form, or his name, or his activities. The udipans, they feed the bhav, they feed the attraction and particular taste of affection that an individual has towards Krishna and our community in the spiritual world. And, we forget that ultimately the holy name is the greatest udipan, because it has both a transformative effect, but also a restorative effect. And this word udipan, yes, we can use it in a general sense. We could say, we can surround ourselves with images, fragrances, textures, sounds, tastes that remind us that there's more to this world, that there's a spiritual dimension, that remind us of wanting to read more or hear more or chant more. Yes, those are udipans of some sort, but really the true meaning of this word udipan is about those stimuli that evoke the natural affection that we have for Krishna in our true self, in the particular rasa that we have. And so even Krishna has udipans. Like the moon reminds him of the gopis. He has things that remind him of his beloved. But it's about this natural feeling and actually that feeling is not for public display. It may leak out, but it doesn't come from this place of I'm invested in getting the feeling. This is a big difference. We may, in our conditioned state, seek out wanting to feel something to show us that, this process works. But actually, as we surrender more and more, the motive isn't to feel something for Krishna. We are already feeling something for Krishna, so we do everything for Krishna, and the result is ecstasy. Not, I want to feel ecstasy, that's why I'm going to do this. Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. And I love how, because I feel like this is very much Prabhupada's mood as well, that we don't take things cheaply in bhakti. Yes. Krishna is not cheap. I've heard him say that in classes. And also Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who's, Srila Prabhupada's guru, would say that it's something akin and alike to like a lady who's making birthing sounds, but, not actually, there's no baby, and also he would give another example of the nipples on a goat, because a goat has nipples, but it doesn't produce any milk.
Yeah.
And so you can't cheat yourself or Krishna or anyone else. Anyone who has sincere devotion will be able to tell that, okay, that's faking it. And I think, the protection of having a very humble mood, especially before our seniors, our gurus and Krishna, and not publicly displaying things. Thank you for helping us protect our devotional creepers and reminding us of the confidential mood of bhakti.
I was going to also say, just on this point of sincere devotees can tell when something's not genuine. There's different types of sincerity, and someone can be very sincere even at the beginning stages, but they may not have the qualification to tell when someone's faking it or recognize when it's genuine as well. So it really is those who are also experiencing it who can recognize it. Generally, you have something that intimate, you don't want people to know anyway. Why would you lose? If someone said to you, I'll give you $1 million if you don't, but you can't tell anyone, would you rather have the credit for people thinking that you have $1 million and lose the $1 million? Or would you rather have the $1 million and nobody knows? You'd want the $1 million. So bhakti is like that. Real bhakti actually is so valuable. It's so ecstatic. It's so intimate and private. We don't discuss our most private matters in public or just with anyone. We only really share it with those who are going to hold it to same value and sanctity and sacredness that we do. And even then one is very careful about the privacy. So even if we find ourselves, if you find yourself, your mind is telling you, oh, people should know or people should see, someone should be able to recognize it. Let me make it a little more easier for them to recognize. That's the false ego. That's not coming from a transcendental place. But we digress from memory. And so we have to just be mindful of time.
you made the good point that we don't want to be premature or artificial in our memory. We want to be sincere according to our place, our position, our qualification. We want our memory to be genuine, sincere, and authentic, not a display for that's coming from a place of ego. I think you very nicely described the mood of memory there. which is just as important as all the other aspects you've kindly shared. So yeah, no, definitely that's
and not to exploit memory in the pursuit of wanting ecstasy. I'm going to remember this because I want to feel ecstasy. Do you see what I mean?
No, explain that a bit. I'm not sure if I do.
So when we prematurely approach subject matters in a way where it's really for the advanced, the motive is different. This is a very conditioned motive is, I'm going to do this because I want a result. It's an achiever's mindset.
Contrived, right?
Yes. Well, it's not even contrived. There may be a genuine thing. I want to feel ecstatic symptoms. So I'm going to remember this pastime. Okay. But the purer someone's motive becomes, it's not about what they're getting from it. You remember, Krishna's purest devotees, they're not the slightest bit interested in whether they feel ecstatic symptoms when they see Krishna, because they just do, because they just love him. Right? They're not motivated by, I'm going to go see Krishna because it feels real, real good. No, I love Krishna. That's why I'm going to go see him. Oh, and then it feels real good.
Yeah, not wanting the result, but focusing on the devotion.
Yes.
And the love.
It's service. Love is service.
Yeah, like I don't know if this relates, you can let me know, but I know there's one pastime where a devotee is fanning Krishna and is crying, but wants the tears to stop because it's interfering with the service of serving Krishna by fanning him properly. So it is about the other person and the devotion and the love, not what I'm getting out of it, that, oh, I'm getting tears or whatever it may be. Like, yeah. So thank you. Okay, so yeah, the next question is, can you share some examples of female devotees, Vaishnavis from our sacred texts, from our Shastra, who demonstrate this quality of memory, this feminine quality of memory?
I mean, I was just thinking about the different types of memory. All of the Vaishnavis I'm going to talk about are replete in and complete in all the different types of memory. They're pure devotees in their own right, very advanced souls. But some of the way their lives are manifest in Shastra highlight different aspects. So I'm not speaking about their particular example because they're devoid of the other aspects, but just highlighting. So for example, if we look at Janava Devi, okay, Lord Nityananda's consort, after he left, at that time, many of Lord Chaitanya and his associates had left, but the devotees of the time accepted her as their Vaishnavi Acharya. They would go, even the Goswamis would go to her to get the final word on many things. She was extremely shastric, with a very powerful memory, and that was fueled by her pure devotion. We look at Draupadi, Queen Kunti, Uttara, we look at their lives. We have Draupadi, who, when push comes to shove, the person she surrenders to and remembers is Krishna. When everything's taken away, she's about to lose everything, she thinks of Krishna and she lets go. Queen Kunti prays to Krishna. If suffering is what makes me think of you, then let me suffer. Because she wants her power of recollection to be only recalling Krishna. And for her, suffering, she's like, if suffering is my udipan, let me suffer. And then we have Uttara, again, even not for herself, actually for her child. Who does she run to protect Maharaj Parikshit, the child in her womb? She goes to Krishna. She's surrounded by powerful, Kshatriyas. She doesn't go to them. She goes to Krishna. She remembers him. She didn't go, oh, I've got to be a chaste wife, I'll just go to my husband. No, I'll go to Krishna, right? And then, of course, the embodiment of always think of me and never forget me, Srimati Radharani. Pure devotional memory. We forget she is the original Vaishnavi. She is Bhakti Devi. And we are just like we are godlike. Our devotion is Radha-like, not the same, but like. We want to follow in the footsteps of the servants of the servants of the servants, of those who hold Krishna in their continuous recollection and continuous thinking. So, in fact, there's so many examples in our Shastra. And the thing is, this is the beautiful thing about Shastra. You know, we get so caught up in this body game of male, female, non-binary, gender fluid, trying to find a place of equality and equal value. But actually, if we read, the more you read Shastra, the more you'll see there isn't a single body type, there isn't a single job, there isn't a single occupation, there isn't a single ashram, there isn't a single level of anything material that excludes one from pure devotional service.
Yep.
Or qualifies one. There's nothing material that qualifies us for pure devotional service.
Yep. And that is affirmed by Krishna, even in the Gita. He says anyone can approach me, and because I think some sections of society may feel that discrimination. He says even women, even laborers, you know, he says, yeah, so you're absolutely right. And I love what you said about Radharani. Actually, when you were just preparing for this talk, I was just sitting here for a bit and I was looking at this beautiful picture of Radharani and Krishna. Yeah, I just got back from Vrindavan about maybe a week ago, and I was looking at this picture today and I was just thinking, like, Srimati Radharani, like, she just sees Krishna. You can, you know, her mirror reflection, it's just Krishna's face. Even when she was born, she wouldn't open her eyes until Krishna came. It's like she doesn't have eyes for anyone and anything not related to Krishna. And you're right, she is the absolute epitome and just sum total of devotion to Krishna. And like you said, we can't imitate that, but we have that little bit by her grace that we can offer from our hearts in that same mood. So thank you for all the examples you shared. You know, Uttara, Queen Kunti, Draupadi, Jhanavi Devi. Also, I went to Radhakund and there's a beautiful temple of Jhanavi Devi there. You know, I said a little prayer to her. So yeah, thank you for reminding us of these Vaishnavis, because we can pray to them that, you know, you have so much devotion to Krishna. Please help me on my path and my devotion to Krishna. Help us. We should pray for each other, you know, because Krishna doesn't want us to come back like just one of us. He wants us all to come. And I think he appreciates that mood that we care about each other's progress. So thank you so much for sharing. Moving on to the next question. So a lot of us can often choose services and careers based on convenience, the opinions and expectations of others, you know, or some kind of material motivation. And this can be a block to memory of Krishna because we're acting outside our nature. So how can we serve according to, you know, or in a job that aligns, you know, our psychophysical nature in a way that our memory of Krishna is enhanced and, you know, with more ease? And also without the sort of comparison to other people. You know, we may see a devotee is successful in their devotional life doing X, Y, Z. So then we go and think, I've got to do it X, Y, Z. But that doesn't work, because the spiritual journey, the path of bhakti, is very personal. So yeah, could you share a few thoughts on that?
You know, so much of our day-to-day human working memory is employed in our occupation, well, paid or unpaid. What's occupation? What occupies your time all day, right? And for
occupation,
the majority,
occupy, I love that.
Yeah, it occupies what's occupying your time for most of the day, and ideally want it to be occupied in a purpose that's in the service of others, which also serves us. Okay, so our varna, our ashram are really important things to identify quickly. And it may be a bit more challenging if in our early years they've not really been identified, and you're kind of trying to find that balance later in life. So correcting it can be, or readjusting it can be, a little bit more difficult later. See, the reason it's important is the more our mind, intelligence, memory, etc., is employed in trying to adjust our material circumstances, the less room is available to hear and recall, okay, to hear and speak about those things that ultimately are primary and not these secondary things. So it's better to invest some time, a little bit of time regularly, in getting it right rather than neglecting it. And then one day you find you're in a situation where you've got to put so much time and energy into it, you no longer have time and energy and mental capacity or memory to be focusing on any of your spiritual practices. So if you neglect your ashram side, you'll find yourself having to invest a lot in it at some point. If you neglect your varna, again, you'll find yourself having to invest a lot. It's like if you forget to eat, you might be able to survive for a bit of time, but then there'll come a point where you'll be so hungry that's the only thing you can think of. And all the shlokas or all the japa, everything, you're not going, your mind's not going to want to go there. All you're going to want to do is eat. And if you don't take care of your health, so whilst we know that my devotion to Krishna isn't unalloyed and unmotivated and uninterrupted, until that point, occupying our biopsychosocial nature in and engaging it through services in this world in an appropriate manner is really relevant to actually being able to have breathing space and time to be able to then use that to engage all of our senses and memory, etc., in the Lord's service. It's absolutely essential. And we want to be devotees for all time, not just for the next 5 years or 10 years. It's something we want to, we're in it for the long haul. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So if you find that comparison is what's making you make unwise decisions, comparison is the killer of joy. Right? You can't compare an apple to an engine. They're two completely different things. They have different purposes. In fact, I don't think I can think of even one similarity between an apple and an engine. Okay. So it's when we compare ourselves to others, it's usually because we are still clinging to trying to find some identity here. But we won't find our identity by looking at someone else. Just like I won't know what I look like by looking at someone else. I have to look in a mirror to see what I look like, or I have to actually look down at myself. Okay. So, and when I say look down at myself, I mean like look upon myself, right? Or be introspective. So how do we stop comparing? This is the thing. How do we stop comparing? Do it. We know when we compare. Next time you catch yourself comparing, say, I'm comparing. I'm only interested in this because this person has it. I'm only interested in this. Actually, we will often compare where someone's getting the results of being occupied in their varna and ashram appropriately. Yep. And what we want is the same result, but we're looking at their path. But their path is different to ours. We forget that the path we're walking goes to exactly the same place. But also bearing in mind that even if our varna and ashram is perfect, it doesn't lead to perfect happiness here. Because plenty of people are well situated in their varna and their ashram, but because of the effects of time, things deteriorate. Because of the effects of other people's free will, things change, things can be taken away, and situations aren't always pleasant. So yes, addressing varna and ashram is an important way to keep our memory sharp and available to focus on bhakti matters. But it is also not the be-all and end-all.
Yes, not forgetting the person behind the path and the process and everything. If we're, that's really nice.
That's what Krishna does to Arjun. He first reminds him of who he is here. You're a warrior. You're a kshatriya. It is inbuilt into you to protect others. You're going to want to do it even if you stop doing it. Even if no one told you to do it, you'll do it. Right? So Krishna's not telling anyone to deny their own identity. In fact, he goes as far in the Bhagavad Gita to say to perform another person's duty, even if perfectly, is dangerous. Better to perform your own duty imperfectly. What does he mean by this? Because people often go, well, hang on, if you can perform another person's duty perfectly, doesn't that mean it's actually your duty because you can do it so well? No, because we can usually only perform another person's duty perfectly for a very short space of time in an emergency situation, right? When something is our nature, our training, our service, we can repeatedly do it, and it often nourishes us rather than depletes us. You know, people who are doing what they're designed to do, there's like this almost biofeedback, virtuous cycle that they're nourished by it as well.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation. I think I was speaking about this with a colleague recently. You know, they have that model, the Japanese model of ikigai as well, it's the intersection between, okay, what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need, and what can you get paid for? And I think we should all reflect on that. How much are we connected to our varna, and how much are we not forgetting Krishna, even in the perfection of that. It's important. Yeah. So
And
thank
one
you
of
for
the
sharing.
strongest, I think, distractions in people finding their correct or most helpful natural varna or dharma is the money game. So much of varna has gotten tied into income, but our nature may not necessarily be used in our maintenance, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need expressing. So I often say to people, if you've wound up in a varna, which is an occupation which pays your bills, and so you can't stop doing it, but you feel like you're dying inside because you're not doing what is in your nature, give that side space. Maybe offer some service in that area, in the community. Do some voluntary work with it. It needs expressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that joy element is more important. That is more precious and priceless than a paycheck. I have personal experience with that. I was doing dentistry. I'm good at it. I can get paid for it. The world needs it. I didn't love it. I love teaching, and I wasn't even good at that in the beginning. But then I became good at it, and now I feel like it is. I love it. I'm good at it. The world needs it. And yeah, you don't always need to get paid for it. I do voluntary elements of teaching, so it's not. I like that. It's not about the money. It's about the motivation and your inclination, your
But
nature.
equally, if certain varnas are motivated by money.
Right.
So for them, the opulence of wealth in that form is a motivating factor. So this is what I mean. It's better to be honest about what your nature and varna is, because the world needs that to go.
Yes.
The world also needs, people who are motivated by growth and expansion and financial growth for things to continue running the way they are.
Yeah. And money is not a bad thing when the purpose of it and the motivation behind it is there. So yeah, I think again it's not like a black and white thing, and it can change even, so it's a very dynamic thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. So balancing life is key to remembering Krishna. Otherwise, when we're sort of in anxiety, stressed about things we could control, you know, how do we pay attention to how we're growing and managing? How can we balance our life to increase our memory of Krishna?
See, I think it speaks a little bit also to our previous answer. And I think I'll probably close with this answer, Balance is essential. What's the standard by which we measure balance is the most essential. How do we know what balance is? Okay. And Srila Prabhupada describes it. Someone asked him, how do I know I'm over-endeavoring? Because over-endeavor is an imbalance. Prabhupada said that you're over-endeavoring if what you're doing doesn't leave you enough time for your own devotional nourishment. It doesn't leave you enough time for your own sadhana. Okay. And Prabhupada even puts health before sadhana, right? So things are imbalanced when we haven't got enough time to look after our physical health, emotional health, and our spiritual health. So when we use this gold standard, it means that we're constantly going to be recalibrating what balance looks like. If you've ever seen a tightrope walker, they're constantly actually moving, but they're just making little micro movements and micro adjustments. Okay, because they know exactly where they're going and they know what path they're taking and what direction they're going in. So if we constantly recalibrate, which just like the tightrope walker, because living in this world is like a tightrope. One thing that, the same thing that was nourishing your devotional service can 5 years later be destroying it. Right? So it's because, especially when you're reliant on the secondary things, like we rely on a lot of especially when we're in the very conditioned state, so much of our devotion is based on having or not having certain things. Right? And so that's why we have this bhoga tyag. Some things come, oh, wow, this is brilliant for my devotional life. I feel inspired. And then that same thing becomes like poison. So we have to constantly be recalibrating our lives to make sure we're making adjustments in our relationships, in our practices, in the way we spend our time, the way we look after our health. Because if we don't recalibrate, then we will find ourselves regularly becoming imbalanced and having to make bigger shifts to bring ourselves back to balance. When we become imbalanced, the mind becomes more of a slave to the 6 enemies of the mind, okay, and our anarthas. And when our mind is a slave to those things, and we all know when we're angry, when our senses are agitated, when we're feeling insecure and therefore have a hoarding or greed mentality, when we're envious, is our memory good? No. Is our ability to read and then recall what we've read good? No. So when we're out of balance, we really don't do our memory or our devotional service any good. So, tying in with our previous answer and just like kind of bringing this whole topic of memory to some conclusion, a lack of balance in our lives, a lack of balance where we don't have enough physical space and time, or psychological space and time, or emotional space and time to give to the activities that primarily nourish our spiritual life, they kick away that very important leg of bhakti, is memory, and the potency of memory to recall those things that are necessary for our devotional life. And if we want all 4 types of our memory, our neurological or physiological, our metaphysical, our spiritual memory, and our pure devotional memory to flourish, then being well situated in this world, having healthy association, so again, finding balance in our association, regularly and attentively hearing and chanting, looking after body, mind, and soul, will mean that all 4 types of our memory grow, flourish, and ultimately align, so that there then ultimately isn't a distinction between the 4 types of memory. They just completely culminate in always thinking of Krishna and never forgetting him.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I hope everyone has made a note of what most resonated, stood out, stuck out. I remember what Bhakti Swami saying whenever we listened to a class, actually he was speaking about Bhakti Swami's books in the context, but we can extrapolate that you should make a note of what stands out, what stood out to you. So I hope we're all doing that. I think for me, definitely the balance one at the end struck a chord. I'm glad I stuck around to the end.
You had no choice.
I know it was a joke. It's me trying to be funny. Thank you so much, Citi-Sakti, for just sharing so many gems, nuggets, questions, practical tips, things to think about, and encouraging us, especially just having this discussion, to do what you were speaking about, which is to hear attentively and regularly with our Zoom cameras on, looking, taking notes. I feel like we're, trying to share the example of how powerful it is when we do that, where we're recording something official here, it's going on a YouTube channel. What's to stop anyone and everyone listening to this to just call up a friend and do this? Pick a topic, speak about it, ask questions, share your realizations. I hope we can all do this more with each other, for each other, so that we can, increase our memory of Krishna.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And remember, everyone, to follow the social media pages and the YouTube for the whole series with the ISKCON Vaishnavi Ministry, who we're so grateful to the whole team for. Shout out to Karuna Shakti, who I met for the first time in her kind of bringing us together as well. So thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,